Yes, there is a sequel to Django Unchained. Yes, it is written by Tarantino and therefore official canon. And yes, it is in graphic novel format. In this episode of Graphic Adaptations, I want to compare the Tarantino movie to the graphic novel published by Vertigo and then explore its lesser-known sequel. Let's talk about Django Unchained. Alright, the movie is pretty damn near perfect in my opinion. It's an unflinching look at the Southern slave trade through the lens of exploitation filmmaking. I wanted to say it was through an exaggerated lens, but that might imply the parts about slavery were exaggerated, and I do not mean that at all. But the violence is certainly ratcheted up to almost cartoonish levels in places. The amount of blood, the graphic novel-esque nature of the stylized Tarantino dialogue, and the way he deflates tension or defers it with humor.
Bye, Miss Laura.
It's all very cinematic and theatrical, but the actual slavery itself does not seem stylized or unrealistic in any way.
I like the way you die, boy.
Now, I'm sure most people have seen the film as it's Tarantino's highest grossing film, so let's get to the comparisons between it and the graphic novel, because it's going to tie back into the movie scenes anyway. In 2007, Quentin Tarantino was writing a book on Sergio Corbucci, who directed the original Django, as well as other classic spaghetti western masterpieces like The Great Silence, which is another influence on Django Unchained. I mentioned in my microgenre video on snow sequels how The Great Silence made an impact, innovating the genre by simply putting it in the snow, something we see in both of Tarantino's westerns. The Hateful Eight, as a matter of record, actually began its life as a Django sequel called Django in White Hell. The title is, I'm sure, a reference to the Lone Wolf and Cub sequel, White Heaven in Hell, similar to how he borrowed the Unchained part of Django Unchained from the 1959 film Hercules Unchained. The Hateful Eight is not the sequel that I was talking about, by the way, at the beginning when I said there was a sequel. The Hateful Eight started its life as a sequel, but was changed during the writing process. And I think that's a really cool idea, but I really like The Hateful Eight the way it is. And I'm sure Tarantino has no regrets, because Hateful Eight wasn't nearly as acclaimed, and a sequel that doesn't do well kind of tarnishes the original in a way. But let's get back to Django Unchained. A year after the movie, we got the graphic novel adaptation, published by Vertigo, based on the uncut, unedited script, without changes. And that's pretty great, because we get like deleted scenes that didn't make either the filming or maybe the edit. Let me just give you a few examples. Now, one of the biggest additions to the comic is getting to see the Broomhilda von Schaft story. We get to see how she got to Calvin Candy's Candyland plantation, how she was lost in a card game by her previous owner, a doughy chump of a guy named Scotty Harmony, a role that was first offered to Jonah Hill, who couldn't take it due to other obligations, though he obviously came back to play the dumb Klansman in the funny scene where they can't see out of their hoods.
You see? Not too good. I mean, if I don't move my head, I can see you pretty good, more or less.
There are many other smaller scenes, bits of dialogue that were snipped from the final edit of the film. For an example, in this scene where we see some of Calvin Candy's disdain for his own white kinsmen that are in his employ. Like, it just gives a better sense of what racism is meant to do, like to shield exploitation and cruelty to other humans by way of pretending there's any real reason for it at all, right? So like Candy hates the poor dumb whites as much as he hates his slaves, so we know that he would enslave any person just so long as he stays on top. The racism and the slavery just points out who it's okay to dehumanize. It's just capitalism in a microcosm. We also get to see this character named Ace Woody, who isn't in the film at all. He's another one of Calvin Candy's henchmen, essentially. In the film, had they filmed the scenes, he would have been played by Kevin Costner. But then Ace got rolled into Walter Goggins' Billy Crash character, and he absorbed some of those lines, and I think that makes sense to slim down the ranks and simplify the plot even more. Keep Django's hit list of targets to the minimum, giving them more weight and more screen time as villains. At the end, we get another bloody twist as Samuel L. Jackson comes to torture Django himself with a red-hot poker. The book is no less brutal than the movie, and in some places was even more so. Now, if I could have had my choice of artists at the time that this book was released, I don't think I could have hoped for better than R.M. Guerra from Scalped, the HBO-style crime comic. His work is perfect here. But that doesn't mean that I think the final result was perfect, though. The veteran comic artist Dennis Cohen also fills in certain pages or issues, and I just wasn't feeling the vibe switch. And he's not the only other contributor to the project. Jason Latour, Daniel Zazelier, and John Floyd are all credited on art duties. And I don't know who was inking and who was penciling, and I'm not saying that these artists didn't do a good job, although admittedly I liked some of the art better than other parts. And some of it I think is pretty ugly, actually, if I'm being honest, but I think more distracting is the inconsistent tone between the art styles. That's probably like the biggest critique that I have on it as a reader. There's also an extended ending, where after Django is given to the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company for a fate worse than death, Broomhilda is already being raped by Ace Woody back at Candyland, which I think emotionally is not where the audience wants to be at that point in the film. It's such an ugly defeat and hard to accept at that point, but at least Django shows up and kills him, even though it's off-screen in the book. Even the final shootout is handled differently in the book. I still think that the comic is pretty damn great. Most of you will likely be able to seek out the collected edition in trade paperback like I have here, or maybe a download if the book is out of print, but I would like to point out a benefit to owning the original 7 issues as they came out monthly. Each issue had a Tarantino-style soundtrack, picked out by I think it was the editor at the end of the issue, which is just a nice detail to have. Every month, another handful of music tracks to put on as you read the issue, and that's a nice detail. I read the issues as they came out, and I didn't do it for every issue, but there was a couple times where I had the time to go through and like add them on YouTube and just hit play while I was reading the issue, and then another one, and see how that felt. And it adds another layer. It's really cool when comics go out of their way to do something like that. Now, as I led with at the start, as great and cool and unique as the graphic novel adaptation is, there is also a sequel, written by Tarantino himself, in collaboration with comics legend Matt Wagner. Wagner had, at the time, been writing a critically acclaimed run for Dynamite Entertainment of the legendary pulp hero Zorro. A Dynamite editor and a Django Unchained producer who knew each other worked out a deal. The stars aligned, and we got the perfect sequel to Django crossed over with Matt Wagner's Zorro, and the only sequel to a Tarantino movie that's ever been. How crazy is that? This is pretty crazy. I know some people are going to say Kill Bill 2, but really that was conceived as one project and, was executed as such. They just split it into 2 and just made that much more money. This is like old man Zorro teams up with Django to go on an adventure. And I think that giving Django another old mentor type figure, somebody who kind of echoes or resembles King Schultz, it's smart. They're both gentlemen and refined in their flowery dialogue, and of course they both have much more to their appearance below the surface. And so aging Zorro up is a nice touch. It keeps a familiar dynamic from the movie. There are touchstones for the movie as well, giving us a glimpse into Broomhilda's future after the movie, working to help other slaves escape bondage through the Underground Railroad. The LeQuint side of the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company. I don't know why that's so hard to say, the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company. The LeQuint side of the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company makes an appearance, which becomes a plot point. We even get a flashback to another adventure with King Schultz that wasn't in the movie, which is really fun to read. Another Tarantino part of the creation is the character of Anvil Charlie, who's similar to Samuel Jackson's Stephen role, a former slave who's turned on his own people. Anvil Charlie will take any slave misbehaving and smash off a finger or toe with his hammer. And I say that I want to give Tarantino credit because that sounds like the kind of character that he would create, right? But if you've read Wagner's Zorro, then you'd remember some characters he's created that match that same kind of creative depravity. I'm specifically talking about the dog guy El Galgo, the Greyhound. He's an officer who faces off against Zorro many times, and each time he gets one of those Z scars cut on his face, and after a bunch of failures, he kind of goes insane and he starts carving them into himself, and he comes towards the end of Wagner's run. I just want to say that Anvil Charlie character could have just as easily been a Wagner creation, but either way, he was really, really interesting and cool in the book. Anvil Charlie is native, and much of the plot of this book is looking at the exploitation of Mexican slaves. So thematically, this maintains both like the themes of Django Unchained and also a connection to Zorro. Much of Zorro's character and purpose is to uplift the poor Mexicans being exploited, and we see some of that plot explored in the second Banderas film, The Legend of Zorro. Part of the charm of the book is also seeing a legitimate sequel for Django, while also honoring the legacy of the Wagner Zorro run by giving it its own legitimate finale. Either fandom needs to check this book out and then get to further explore that now connected world. The Zorro series, for example, has at least another 5 books in it. Now, I could talk for a while about Wagner's Zorro run in its own right, but I think that's best left for another video. But if you'd like to see that video, let me know in the comments. Well, you know what, like, save your skin on your finger pads. I'm going to do the video anyway because I'm excited to reread it all again, so that's something to look forward to. Now, I originally thought it would be cool to end the video by prompting an animated film version of Django Zorro, like a direct to Blu-ray streaming with Dynamite as the producers and Tarantino directing or maybe advising or producing so he can technically not deviate from his plan of only making 10 films. You could ask the RZA to do the soundtrack maybe, see if Jamie Foxx wants to come back and do a voice. Ask Banderas to do a voice of Zorro, which would be really cool because he's now, you know, getting to age-appropriate level for that. So that's cool, right? That's a cool idea. Well, it turns out somebody was already talking about doing it in live action. So, great minds, right? Live action would be pretty amazing, but I think animated might be the way to go since it's been a while now since its release. The pedigree of blaxploitation, or at least exploitation crossing over with anime, has a great track record of Samurai Champloo and the Boondocks and Afro Samurai, and this is an easy home run idea, so, you know, we'll never get it. Like the animated Mallrats sequel that never materialized, another story of woe from production hell. Isn't it just the worst when the people who have all the money tell you there's no money in making amazing art things, meanwhile you'd do it for free if someone would let you? Well, I don't have that much money, but in 7 days, I'll be back with another free video. So, we'll see you next week.